Since they were little, Camila and Laura were inseparable. They shared laughs, secrets, and even the same blanket on cold nights in the small town where they grew up. Their parents' house, with its blue windows and constant smell of cornmeal cake, seemed the perfect portrait of family harmony. But behind the smile in every photograph, there lurked a silent shadow, a subtle imbalance no one dared to name. Camila was the daughter everyone praised, polite, studious, calm, the girl who never gave anyone any trouble. Laura, on the other hand, was the storm. She cried easily, questioned everything, and always felt like she had to fight to be noticed. Even though she loved her sister, something inside her ached every time she heard her parents say, "Why can't you be more like Camila?" Childhood passed, and over time, the distance between them grew without either of them realizing it. Games turned into silences, hugs into restrained gestures. Camila believed it was just a phase. After all, sisters fight and make up. But inside Laura, something simmered, something even she couldn't explain. A feeling of not belonging. At 24, Laura began avoiding her family. She would come home late, eat lunch alone, and spend hours locked in her room. Camila tried to get closer, but her attempts only seemed to make the situation worse. "You don't understand what it's like to be me," Laura said one night, before slamming the door. That night, Camila lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Her sister's words echoed in her mind like an open wound. Being me. What did Laura mean by that? Doubt began to creep into Camila's thoughts, like an invisible crack about to open. The following Sunday, during lunch, her father praised Camila's promotion at work. Laura let out a bitter laugh. Of course, the perfect Camila, the daughter to be proud of. The atmosphere froze. Ricardo tried to change the subject, but the words had already been thrown, sharp as knives. Her mother, Helena, glanced at Laura, a quick but weighty glance. Camila noticed, and for the first time, felt there was something she didn't understand in their relationship. A secret, perhaps, hidden beneath years of apparent normalcy. After lunch, Laura went upstairs to her room and began to cry silently. Camila listened, hesitated, but decided not to go in. Deep down, something was holding her back, maybe fear, maybe guilt. As night fell over the house, the sound of an old song echoed from Laura's room. Camila recognized the melody. It was the same one her father used to sing when they were little. Nostalgia brought tears to Camila's eyes. At that moment, she didn't know it yet, but that would be the last day she would see her sister truly smile. Sometimes, the people closest to you hide the deepest secrets. Subscribe now and don't miss what happens when truth tears a family apart and love fights to survive.
The following days were marked by a silence that weighed more heavily than any argument. Laura barely spoke to her parents, and when she passed Camila in the hallway, she averted her gaze. The atmosphere in the house became cold, mechanical, as if everyone were acting in a play no one wanted to perform anymore. Camila tried to talk to her mother, but Elena just sighed and said, "Your sister is going through a difficult time. Give her time." However, her mother's tone sounded more like fear than concern, a fear Camila couldn't decipher. One Friday night, while they were eating dinner, Laura broke the silence. "You know what's funny?" she said, staring at her plate. "You guys act like I'm a mistake, like I should be grateful for being here." Her mother dropped her fork. The metallic sound echoed through the room like thunder in the silence. Ricardo tried to defuse the situation. "Laura, no one here thinks that." But she interrupted him. "Yes, you do. You just don't say it out loud." And then, looking directly at Camila, he added, "And she knows it." The words were like a punch. Camila stood still, uncomprehending. After that dinner, Laura disappeared for 2 days. When she returned, she had a different look in her eyes, cold, determined. Camila tried to hug her, but she pulled away. "You have everything, Camila. You always have. And the worst part is, you don't even realize it." Before her sister could respond, Laura left the room, leaving the air tinged with resentment. Camila began to blame herself. She spent nights reliving moments from her childhood, trying to pinpoint the point where everything went wrong. Had she done something wrong? Or was Laura struggling with something bigger, something she herself didn't know about? On Monday, Camila found her father sitting in his office looking through old files. He looked tense. "Dad, what's going on with Laura?" she asked. Ricardo simply replied, "Some things don't need to be dug up, daughter." The answer left her uneasy. Since when had her father avoided family matters? That sentence, spoken with a choked voice, sparked something inside her, a premonition. That night, while everyone was asleep, Camila went down to her office. The moon partially illuminated the room. She looked at the drawers, felt her heart race, and then saw a small key lying on the floor. She hesitated for a few seconds, then opened the locked drawer. Inside was an old birth certificate and the letter folded in four with the name Marta written in blue ink.
Camila didn't know it, but in that moment, her life and her entire family's history had just changed forever. The next morning dawned heavy, as if the air in the house carried the weight of unspoken words. Camila woke with her eyes fixed on the letter she had found the night before. The handwriting was feminine, firm, and elegant. She hesitated before opening it, but something inside her told her there was no turning back. As she read it, her heart skipped a beat. "Dear Ricardo," the letter began, "I hope you did what you promised. Our daughter deserves a better life, even if she never knows who I am." The name Laura appeared below, scrawled in hurried letters. Camila felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She stood paralyzed for long minutes, trying to understand what this meant. Was Laura her father's biological daughter? And who was Marta? The questions multiplied, but one cruel certainty remained. Someone had been lying for a long time, and that lie was about to explode. During breakfast, Camila watched her father from afar. He was leafing through the newspaper, but his hands were shaking slightly. Her mother feigned normalcy, but her eyes betrayed unease. When Laura came downstairs, the silence was absolute. It was as if everyone was waiting for the first one to speak, and no one had the courage. It was Laura who broke the silence. "You know, I always thought there was something wrong here," she said, looking directly at Camila. "Now I know for sure." The sentence was said with such anger and pain that it made Camila shiver. She wanted to ask what Laura knew, but her sister slammed the door. Camila tried to follow, but her father grabbed her arm. "Let her go," he said, his tone tinged with fear and guilt. His voice sounded fragile, as if carrying the weight of decades. Some truths shouldn't be told. But Camila was no longer a dutiful girl. The letter in her hand burned like fire. That night, Camila rummaged through more drawers, folders, and envelopes. She found a copy of Laura's adoption document, but the dates didn't match. The document had been issued a year after the registered birth. Everything seemed forged, carefully constructed to hide something. Lying in bed, Camila stared at the ceiling, trying to hold back her tears. "My God, what have you done, Dad?" she whispered. Outside, the wind beat against the windows, as if the house were trying to warn her that the secrets hidden within were ready to escape. That night, Camila dreamed of her childhood, of her two sisters running around the yard, laughing, unsure of what the future held for them. When she woke, she felt those memories already belonged to another life.
And deep down, I knew Laura wasn't the only one about to lose her footing. Camila spent the day with the letter hidden in her pocket, the weight of the paper weighing it down like lead. Every time she looked at her father, she saw a tired man with dark circles under his eyes and a distant look in his eyes. Something had changed in him, and now she understood why. At dinner time, the atmosphere was tense. Laura was absent, and Helena seemed restless. Camila decided she couldn't pretend anymore. "Mom, she said, her voice trembling. "Who was Marta?" Her mother's fork fell onto her plate, the metallic sound echoing like a sentence. Ricardo looked up, alarmed. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked, almost whispering. Camila took the letter from her pocket and placed it on the table. The silence that followed was so profound, it seemed to drown out all the noise in the house. Helena began to cry. "You don't understand, Camila. I did what was right. I tried to protect you." The words came out between sobs. Ricardo stood up, furious, and shouted, "Enough! This isn't up for discussion." But it was too late. The truth was already out in the open. Camila stared at her father with tears in her eyes. "Did you raise me on a lie?" she asked. "Who is the real Laura?" Ricardo looked away, unable to answer. Helena tried to calm her daughter, but her voice was a thread of desperation. "Your sister is your sister, and that's all you need to know." But Camila wouldn't accept it. "No, Mom, that's not enough." The firmness in her voice surprised even herself. For the first time, she felt anger, not at her sister, but at the parents who had decided to play with their fate. That night, Helena knocked on her daughter's bedroom door, but Camila didn't open. Inside, she wept silently, clutching the letter to her chest. The love she had always felt for her parents was now mixed with indescribable pain. Meanwhile, Ricardo locked himself in his office. The lights stayed on late, and Camila heard the muffled sound of sobbing. The man she'd always seen as a pillar was now just a man broken by his own choices. Hours later, Laura arrived home. She walked through the living room without saying a word and went upstairs to her bedroom. But when she caught Camila's eye, she whispered something that made her freeze. "I know what you discovered, and I know you don't know everything yet." The door closed, the sound echoing like the crack of shattering glass. Camila, alone in the hallway, realized that the rift between them was no longer just emotional. It was made of secrets, lies, and truths that would yet destroy everything they knew as family. The next morning, Camila woke with a firm resolve to uncover the whole truth, no matter what. Her sister's cold gaze and her parents' silence left her with no doubt. There was something dark in her story, something that had been carefully hidden. She returned to the office, this time without hesitation, determined to find answers. The room felt different in the daylight. The smell of aged wood and ancient papers permeated the air. She opened every drawer, rummaged through every folder, every forgotten envelope, until, among the receipts and tax documents, she found a small, locked metal box. Engraved on the lid was a single letter, M. Camila tried to force the lock, but failed. Then she remembered the key she'd found days earlier, lying on the floor. It fit perfectly. When she opened it, her heart raced. Inside was an old photo of a baby in the arms of an unknown woman, and on the back, the inscription, Laura, 1999. She stood still for long seconds, staring at the image. The woman in the photo had a sad smile and a necklace with a pendant identical to the one Laura had always worn. The coincidence was impossible. Camila felt a shiver run down her spine. That necklace, which her sister swore was the only gift from her biological mother, was in fact a living proof of the truth. At that moment, the sound of the door creaking pulled her from her thoughts. It was Helena, standing in the doorway, pale. "Camila, what are you doing there?" she asked, her voice trembling. Camila turned slowly, holding the photo. "I just want to know who we really are, Mom." Helena approached and tried to take the photograph,
but Camila backed away. "You lied to us," she accused. "To me, to Laura, to everyone." Helena began to cry, her hands shaking. "I did what I had to do. Your father made a mistake, and I tried to make it right." Camila didn't respond. Anger and compassion mixed in her chest. She looked at the photo again and noticed something in the background. A calendar on the wall, marking the same year Laura was born. It all fit. Marta, the woman in the letter, was Laura's real mother. That night, Camila couldn't sleep. Images of the letter, the photo, and her mother's desperate gaze swirled in her mind. It was as if all the pieces of a painful puzzle were finally falling into place. She just didn't know that Laura had also started to piece together the same puzzle, and that the truth was about to explode in front of everyone. The next day, the sun seemed colder, the air heavier. Laura didn't show up for breakfast, and Helena avoided looking at Camila. Ricardo left early, claiming an urgent meeting, but Camila knew it was an escape. The silence was now almost unbearable, a prison made of secrets.
Camila decided to confront her mother once and for all. "Mom, tell me the truth," he begged, holding the letter and the photo. "Who is Martha? Who is Laura?" Helena looked away, but tears began to fall before she could even answer. "Martha was the woman who destroyed our family. She had an affair with your father. And Laura is the result of that." Camila gasped. The ground seemed to fall away beneath her feet. "So, she's his daughter?" Helena nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, and I agreed to raise her because I couldn't bear to see him abandon her. I wanted to believe that love could erase shame." Pain washed over Camila. Every childhood memory, every hug within the four walls of that house now seemed tainted by a lie. "And me? What was I to you? A disguise? A distraction to hide your guilt?" Helena tried to get closer, but Camila backed away. "You created a perfect life, Mom, but you forgot to tell her it was all an act." That night, Camila left home. She walked the streets of the small town aimlessly, trying to process everything. The streetlights mingled with the tears on her face. She felt deceived, used, lost. She no longer knew who she was, or where love ended and lies began. Meanwhile, at home, Helena cried alone on the sofa, clutching the torn photograph of Laura as a baby. Ricardo returned late, and upon seeing his wife in such a state, he knew the secret had been revealed. "So it's over," he murmured, sitting beside her. But the worst was yet to come. The next morning, Laura came downstairs with a cold expression. "You don't have to hide anything anymore," she said. "I already know everything." She tossed the copy of the letter on the table and glared at her parents. "You turned me into a lie, and now I'm going to make you live with it." Helena tried to get closer, but Laura backed away. "Do you think I should thank you for raising me?" she said, her voice breaking. "Well, just know this. I would rather have been abandoned than live surrounded by lies." Camila watched from afar, her heart aching. It was the beginning of the end, the collapse of a family that had spent years pretending to be perfect while the truth rotted under the rug. And for the first time, she realized that maybe Laura had been right all along. Camila spent the next few days in silence. Her mother's revelation had left her confused, but also determined. She needed to hear the other side of the story, and only one person could give her that: Marta. After searching through old records, she discovered an address in a neighboring town, listed as Marta de Oliveira, seamstress. When she arrived at the small house, time seemed to stand still. The walls were covered with old portraits, and the scent of lavender filled the air. an elderly woman opened the door. Her eyes, though tired, held a familiar hue, the same brown as Laura's. "Are you Helena's daughter?" she asked, before Camila could even say who she was.
Camila nodded, confused. Marta sighed, as if she'd already expected this visit. "I thought someone would come one day. Come in. Other people's lies always come knocking on the door." Her voice was calm, but filled with sorrow. They sat down, and Camila showed her the letter. Marta ran her fingers over the paper, moved. "I wrote this 24 years ago." With tears in her eyes, Marta began to tell her story. "Your father and I met when he was still married to Helena. I fell in love. It was a mistake, I know. When I got pregnant, he promised he would leave everything and be with me. But when the child was born, he disappeared. And a week later, Helena showed up at my door." Camila felt her heart race with each word. Marta continued. "She said she would raise Laura as her own, that her biological mother's name would be erased from the records. I accepted because I didn't want to destroy anyone's life, but I never stopped watching from afar." A tear ran down her face. "I watched Laura grow up without recognizing me." Camila took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. "Why now? Why didn't you ever tell me?" Marta smiled sadly. "Because sometimes love demands silence. I'd rather be the hidden villain than the woman who destroyed a family." Before leaving, Camila looked around and saw something on a dresser. A small, open box containing a necklace identical to Laura's. "I bought two," Marta said, smiling wistfully. "One for her, one for me. That way I'd never forget." On the way home, the sky was beginning to darken. The sound of rain hitting the car window mingled with the memories now echoing in her mind. Marta's love seemed real, and so did Helena's guilt. But what hurt her most was the realization that Laura was right. She had always lived a life that wasn't hers. Camila parked her car in front of her house and looked at the lights. Inside, the past waited to be confronted. She knew she could no longer run. It was time for the truth to come out, even if it destroyed everything. Dinner that night was a minefield. Ricardo tried to act normal, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. Helena avoided her daughter's eyes, picking at her plate without eating. Laura, however, was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that precedes a storm. "So it's true," he said suddenly, his voice cold. "Did you think you could hide this forever?" The silence fell like a bomb. Ricardo dropped his cutlery and stood still. "What are you talking about?" he tried to hide, but Laura had already taken the papers out of her bag. She threw the letter, the certificate, the photo onto the table. "This," she shouted, "the lie you call family." Helena clapped her hands to her mouth in despair. Ricardo tried to stand, but Laura pushed him back into his chair. "You destroyed 2 lives, Dad, mine and hers." She pointed at Camila, who watched with tears in her eyes.
"Laura, please," Helena tried. "You don't understand." But Laura interrupted her with a scream. "I do understand. I understand that I was the living reminder of a betrayal you tried to erase." The pain in her voice was stronger than any anger. She trembled, but she wouldn't stop. "I grew up believing I was adopted, that I should be grateful, and you never had the courage to tell the truth." Camila tried to intervene. "Laura, please. I was deceived too." But Laura turned on her. "Deceived? You lived the life that was supposed to be mine. The love, the affection, the opportunities, everything, while I was the shadow of their guilt." His father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I messed up, but I tried to fix it. By lying?" The word echoed through the room like thunder. Ricardo's face fell. He sat back down, exhausted, defeated, and murmured, "I just wanted to protect you." But there was nothing left to protect. The air became dense, suffocating. Helena began to cry, begging for forgiveness, while Laura grabbed the documents and left the table. "I don't want your forgiveness. I want distance." And as she walked through the door, she dropped the necklace, the same one in the photo, on the cold floor. Camila bent down and picked it up, her hands trembling. The pendant now felt heavy, laden with all the truth they tried to hide. Looking at her parents, she realized nothing would ever be the same again. Outside, the rain fell heavily, the sound echoing like a wail. Laura walked alone down the street without an umbrella, while inside the house, Camila's world finally crumbled, not with screams, but with the silence of someone realizing they never truly knew the ones they loved most. The next day dawned silently. Laura didn't return home, and the emptiness she left seemed to fill every room. The breakfast table was set, but no one sat down. The living room clock ticked slowly and agonizingly. Ricardo stared at his sister's chair as if expecting her to simply appear and tell her that it had all been a nightmare. Ricardo spent the day locked in his room, and Helena wandered around the house like a ghost, touching old objects, mementos of a life that now seemed distant. Camila tried to keep busy, washing dishes, tidying the room, but everything reminded her of Laura. Her perfume, the photos, her voice. Every detail was a cruel reminder that the house was colder without her.
That night, Camila went to her sister's room. The smell was still the same, a mix of floral perfume and old paper. On the desk, she found an open notebook with notes and random sentences. "Will I ever be enough?" And "You can't fix something that was born wrong." The tears came without her being able to avoid it.
Camila lay down on her sister's bed and cried herself to sleep. She dreamed of the two children running around the yard, laughing and hugging, before a shadow separated them. When she woke, she felt a sense of loss, not just of her sister, but of her own identity. The next morning, Elena knocked on the door. "Your father is sick," she said desperately. Camila ran to the room and found Ricardo pale and sweating. He was holding an old photo of his two daughters. "I ruined everything," he murmured, before being taken to the hospital. The doctors said it was a nervous breakdown. His body was reacting to the weight of the guilt he'd carried for decades. Camila stayed by his side, holding his hand, even though she wasn't sure she'd forgiven him. In a moment of lucidity, he looked at her and said, "You're my daughter, Camila, even if the blood says otherwise." Those words broke her heart, because deep down, it wasn't the blood that hurt. It was the lie. It was knowing that their love had always come at a price. When Camila returned home, she found Elena sitting in the living room, her eyes red. "Laura doesn't answer my calls," she whispered. "She hates us." Camila sat next to her mother and hugged her. For the first time in a long time, the silence between them was one of compassion, not anger. That night, before going to sleep, Camila lit a candle and placed Laura's necklace on the nightstand. "Come home, little sister," she murmured. "We can still fix this." But the wind that blew out the flame was the only answer she received. Days turned into weeks. Laura didn't hear from her. Elena slowly began to wither, and Ricardo remained hospitalized. The house, once filled with laughter, was now a tomb of memories. Camila divided her time between caring for her mother and visiting her father, trying not to think about the rift that had opened between them. One morning, while tidying her sister's room,
she found an envelope hidden under the drawer. Inside was an unfinished letter written by Laura. "Sometimes I think that if I had been loved from the beginning, I wouldn't have become this bitter person. But how can you love someone when the whole world treats you like a mistake?" Camila clutched the paper to her chest, crying softly. She decided to try to find her. She went to the old cafe where Laura used to work and spoke with a colleague of hers. "She came by a few days ago," she said. "She seemed lost. She said she was going to settle things with the past." Camila knew immediately where she was going, to see Marta. Helena got in his car and drove to the neighboring town. When she arrived at Marta's house, she saw Laura sitting on the porch. The two stared at each other for a few seconds, and time seemed to stand still. Laura was different, tired, worn, but with a calmer look in her eyes. "So you also came to hear the truth from Saint Marta?" she asked sarcastically.
Camila didn't answer. Marta left the house and looked at them both with a mixture of sadness and love. "You two are the best and worst that this secret has left in the world," she said, tears in her eyes. "And neither of you is to blame for the sin that was committed before you were born." Laura cried for the first time in front of her. "Why did you leave me?" Marta hugged her, trembling. "Because I wanted to protect you from me, from all of this." The words, simple and sincere, broke the years of ice. Camila watched the scene and felt a knot in her chest. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new. On the way home, the two of them drove in silence. Laura stared out the window, thoughtful. "I don't know if I can forgive," she said, without looking at Camila. "But I don't think I want to hate anymore." Camila smiled sadly. "Maybe it's a start." When they arrived, Helena was waiting at the door. Upon seeing Laura, she ran and hugged her. No words were spoken, only the sound of 3 hearts beating in unison, the fragile sound of a family trying to rebuild itself. That night, Laura slept at home for the first time in weeks. Camila, lying in her room, heard her sister breathing in the next room and felt a small flame reignite inside her. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It was hope. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and regret. Ricardo was thinner, his face pale and his eyes sunken. When he saw Camila and Laura enter together, a half-smile appeared on his tired face. "My girls," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. Their presence was the peace he'd been searching for years, but now it had come too late. Camila held his hand, while Laura remained distant, arms crossed. The silence between father and daughter was heavy, as if carrying all the words that were never spoken. Ricardo looked at Laura and tried to draw her closer with his gaze. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, daughter, but I need to tell you one last thing." He asked Camila to retrieve a folder from the bedside table. Inside was a sealed letter with Laura's name on it. "I wrote this the day everything came to light," he said with difficulty. "But I didn't think I had the right to give it to you." Laura hesitated to touch the envelope, but her father's look, broken, remorseful, and sincere, convinced her.
"Did you know I was your daughter?" Laura asked, her tears still streaming down her face. "Since day one," he replied, "and that's what kills me. Because I loved you from day one, and I spent my life trying to hide that love." The tears flowed silently, a mixture of guilt and tenderness. Camila, hearing that, felt her chest tighten. That man, whom she had always considered a hero, now seemed merely human, flawed, regretful, and tired. "Dad, we'll be fine," she lied, knowing he no longer had time to hear the full truth.
Ricardo smiled with effort. "Promise you won't let the past destroy you?" Camila nodded, and Laura fell silent. The heart monitor made a rhythmic sound, like a clock counting down the last seconds of a story coming to an end. A moment later, he closed his eyes and murmured something barely audible. "Your love is all that's left of me." Then the continuous beeping of the monitor filled the room, and the world seemed to stop. Helena burst into tears, and Camilla hugged her mother, while Laura just watched, motionless, in shock. The funeral took place 2 days later under a gray sky. Few relatives attended. Helena held a white rose, and Laura kept her gaze fixed on the casket, as if trying to absorb what remained of the father she could never call Dad out loud. That night, alone in her room, Laura finally opened the letter. The words trembled on the page, written with regret and love. "You have always been my daughter. No matter the blood, the mistakes, or the shame, if I ever have any legacy, may it be the love I never knew how to show." Laura cried until dawn, and for the first time, Camila heard the sound of her sister crying and felt no guilt, just a deep longing that somehow they could heal together. Days after the funeral, the house felt even emptier. The walls held echoes of the past, laughter, arguments, secrets. Laura barely spoke, and Helena spent her days looking at old photos. Camila knew she had to act before the silence swallowed them all, so she decided to look for her sister in her father's old office. Laura was there, sitting in his chair, documents spread out across the table. The afternoon sun streamed in through the window, illuminating the necklace she'd dropped weeks before. "I thought you were going to burn all this," Camila said quietly. Laura replied without looking up. "I thought about it, but the more I read, the more I realized that destroying the past doesn't erase what it left behind." Camila approached slowly. "He loved you, Laura. In the twisted way, the wrong way, but he loved you." Laura laughed bitterly. "Love? He denied me the right to exist, and now he expects me to settle for a letter?" Camila took a deep breath. "Maybe forgiveness isn't for him, but for you." The sentence seemed to pierce her. Laura stood and faced her sister, her eyes filled with tears and anger. "You say it as if it were easy. You had everything, Camila. And I grew up thinking it was someone's mistake." Camila took a step closer. "And you think it was easy for me to discover that the life I lived was a lie? That I was never who I thought I was?" The air grew heavy between them. Two truths colliding forcefully, two open wounds bleeding in the same space. Laura was crying now, trembling. "I just wish he had truly loved me." Camila touched her shoulder. "He did, Laura. He just didn't know how to show it. None of us did."
Laura's tears turned into sobs. "I hate him, and I hate that I still miss him." Camilla hugged her, and for the first time since it all began, Laura couldn't resist. They cried together, like two girls trying to make sense of the world again. As they walked away, Laura looked at the necklace on the table and picked it up. "Maybe this is all that's left of him." Camilla smiled softly. "No, what's left of him is us." The sunset tinted the office with orange and gold hues. It was as if the house was breathing for the first time in months. Laura looked at the photos on the wall and whispered, "I think I finally understand what he meant in that letter." Camilla, with tears in her eyes, replied that love can even be born from a lie and still be real. Outside, the wind blew lightly, and a dry leaf blew through the window, landing on the table between the two sisters. A silent symbol that, despite everything, the past had finally been put to rest. The days after the funeral dragged on with the slowness of endless grief. The house, once filled with voices, now breathed in whispers. Helena spent her mornings sitting on the porch, looking at the garden Ricardo had tended for years. Laura and Camila avoided the subject of death, as if silence were a form of respect or escape. A sunny Saturday brought something unexpected, a wooden box delivered by a messenger. The sender was the family lawyer. Inside were documents, old photos, and a videotape. "Your father wanted you to view this together," the accompanying letter said. The two looked at each other in silence, unsure if they were ready. The video recorder still worked, even covered in dust. When the image appeared, the colors were faded, but the sound filled the room. It was Ricardo, younger, holding the two little girls. "These are my daughters," he said, with a sincere smile. "The reason I still believe in second chances." Laura brought her hand to her mouth in surprise. Tears came before she could stop them. Camila watched her father's face in the video and felt a mixture of love and pain. He seemed more alive there than he had in life in the last few months. As the video continued, small scenes from childhood emerged. Birthdays, laughter, hugs, and then a never-before-seen recording. Ricardo, sitting alone, looking at the camera. "If you're watching this, it's because I didn't have the courage to say what I should have said in life. I made a mistake, but the love I felt for you two was the only thing I got right." Helena wept silently in the corner. Laura and Camila embraced wordlessly. It was as if that video were her father's last embrace, a voiceless but soulful apology.
After the recording ended, the two sat in silence for long minutes. The sound of the wind blowing through the window seemed to carry a different kind of peace, one that came not from the absence of pain, but from the acceptance of it. Camila looked at her sister and said softly, "He loved us the way he knew how." Laura nodded, wiping away her tears. "Maybe we need to learn to love like that too, imperfectly but truly." In the following days, they began organizing the house. Among boxes and souvenirs, they found letters, diaries, and even old family recipes. Each discovery was a small reconstruction, not of the lie that brought them together, but of the truth that now set them free. And as time passed, the house stopped feeling like a tomb. It became a home again, a home filled with memories, scars, and surviving love. Autumn arrived, bringing soft light through the windows. Leaves fell over the yard, and Helena, for the first time in months, began planting new flowers in the garden. Camila watched her from afar, with a new feeling, not anger, but tenderness. The mother, who had previously seemed cold, now revealed herself to be merely human, tired of carrying guilt that never healed. One afternoon, Helena called her daughters over for a chat. The kitchen table was set with coffee and cake, just like old times. "I've thought a lot," she began, her voice breaking. "I spent half my life trying to hide the shame of being cheated on, and the other half trying to hide the regret of having lied." Laura was silent, her eyes welling up. "Mom, I wanted to hate you, for everything. But I understand. It must have been horrible to live with that." Helena nodded, crying. "It was. And even more horrible was seeing what it did to you." Camila took her mother's hand. "Father made a mistake, but you also saved us from greater pain. He was able to love Laura because you allowed it, and I grew up with a sister because you chose." Those words, simple and true, made Helena burst into tears, but they were different tears this time, of relief. The three hugged for long minutes. None of them tried to justify themselves or promise that everything would be easy. It was a reconciliatory hug.
the first sincere one in a long time. In the following days, they began restoring the house. They painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and even laughed, remembering past memories. Laura started cooking again, something she hadn't done since her teens. Camila brought music into the house, and Helena flowers. Life was blossoming amidst the ruins. One night, sitting on the porch, Laura said something that echoed in the air. "You know, I always thought adoption defined me. But now I understand it wasn't about that. It was about the love I accepted, even though I didn't know I deserved it." Camila smiled, moved. "So now you know you deserved it. Always."
Helena looked at them both and smiled back. "You are my daughters, by blood, by soul, and by choice." Her words floated in the air, light and sincere, dissolving the last trace of guilt. That night, the three of them dined together for the first time since the truth came out. The table, once a scene of arguments, was now a symbol of new beginnings. The sound of laughter echoed through the house, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like Ricardo was there, smiling with them. Forgiveness, after all, doesn't erase the past, but it transforms its weight into something bearable, and sometimes even beautiful. Time passed slowly, as if the universe wanted to give that family a chance to breathe. Months after Ricardo's death, the house was different, not just in the colors of the walls, but in the energy that filled it. The flowers in the garden were blooming again, and the smell of fresh coffee once again filled the mornings. It was a new beginning, silent, but full of meaning. Camila and Laura decided to sell their house and move to another city, not out of rejection, but out of a need to start over. "This house will always be the place where truth was born," Camila said as she packed boxes. Laura agreed, and also where love survived. The two exchanged a slight smile, the kind of smile that had previously seemed impossible. On moving day, Helena watched them from the porch, holding a cup of coffee. Her gaze was serene, almost hopeful. "Go live, girls. Don't let guilt become an inheritance." Camila hugged her and replied, "You taught us to fight. Now we'll learn to fly." The road to the new city was long, but the silence inside the car was different this time. It wasn't the silence of discomfort, but of understanding. Laura looked out the window watching the countryside pass by and commented, "You know what's strange? I thought I'd never be able to feel at peace with all this, but now I do." Camila smiled. "Maybe peace doesn't come from truth. Maybe it comes from what we choose to do with it." When they arrived at their new apartment, small and sunny, they both laughed at the bare walls. "It smells like a new beginning. It smells like home." Among the boxes, they found an old photograph, the two of them as children, holding hands in the garden of their old house. They decided to hang it on the living room wall. Life slowly began to reorganize itself. Laura got a job teaching children's literature, an irony of fate for someone who had grown up without happy stories. Camila opened a small design shop, something she had always dreamed of. Sometimes the two found themselves reminiscing about the past, but now those memories were accompanied by a serene smile. One night while they were having dinner on the porch, the subject naturally came up again. "Have you ever thought about your father?" Laura asked. "Every day," Camila replied. "But now I think about him without anger. I think he'd be happy to see us like this." Laura nodded, moved. "I think so too."
After dinner, they went to the small park in front of the building. They sat on the grass, watching the sky darken. Laura opened the necklace she still wore and showed the miniature photo of Ricardo. "I kept it to remind me that even mistakes can make something beautiful." Camila smiled, her eyes welling up. "And what turned out beautiful was us." When they returned home, they reframed the childhood photo. Underneath, Laura wrote a sentence on a piece of paper. "Truth destroys what is false, but reveals what is eternal." When they finished, they sat in silence, just staring at the photo on the wall. It was more than a memory. It was a symbol of pain, of forgiveness, and of love that, even wounded,
found its way. That night, as the two slept in their new home, the wind blew through the window, causing the photo to sway gently. It was as if the past was saying its final goodbye, not in guilt, but in peace. And so, between losses and revelations, Camila and Laura finally understood that family is not about what is said, but about what survives, even after all the truths come to light. The truth destroyed their family, but it also set them free. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional true life stories that remind us what family truly means. Stay until the next story, because sometimes healing begins where secrets end.